Hello everyone. Today we will be jumping into the first of two lessons that we have about past tense. Now, there's really only one type of past tense in Japanese, but to make things a bit easier, we're focusing on two different categories of verbs or sentence structures. We're going to start with the easy ones this time, and we will be jumping into the harder ones next week. And keep in mind, as we do the lesson today, you are free to ask questions whenever you want. There's not a specific question time. So if you've got a question, just toss it out and you can type it in the channel, and I or someone else will be happy to answer it, when the time comes. Otherwise, I hope it helps you. So today we are talking about past tense. We've done polite tense, the polite present up until now. And for the time being, we are sticking with the polite forms. We will get to casual eventually, but polite form is safe in 99.9% of interactions. So we're going to learn that first. And let's go ahead and jump in. When we talked about our sentences, in the present, the first things we started learning was with our A wa B des pattern. And we learned that even though it seems really simple, you actually end up seeing this formation in a lot of, common natural Japanese. It might be longer, but you've got that core there. And we focused on that des. That des verb. It's kind of a verb, kind of isn't, but we used it to say, A is B. And so if, we're talking about myself, and this isn't true, actually, amazingly. I'm not sleepy today, but if I was, I might say something like this. Maiko wa nemui desu. And just for the sake of the actual thing we're going to do next, let me give you one more example. Just in case you didn't know, I am not Japanese. My wife and my kids are, but I'm not. I'm from America, so I am an America-jin desu. And I should have typed America out in katakana, but it did not want to go that way. There we go. And so this is talking about now, the present. So let's talk about how we can switch things over into past. Now with des, it's actually extremely simple. It's the easiest. It's why we're jumping into it first. And there's only one thing you have to do, is you take des and you switch it to deshita. That is the past tense form, the positive past tense form of des. Nothing else changes in the sentence except for this one word. There's no structural changes, ordering changes, none of that. All you have to change is, des to deshita. So let's pretend this is not on my plan of things to do in my life, but let's say I give up my American citizenship, and for some reason Japan decides to let me become a citizen there. At that point, in this future, I could say, oh, I was American. I was American, I no longer am now. A past tense thing. Maiko wa America-jin deshita. We're still using that same formula, the A wa B des, saying A is B, except now we're not saying is, we're saying was. Or depending on the subject, it might be were. Maiko wa America-jin deshita. And here's one that's actually true. I am no longer a student. I was at some point a long time ago. But I no longer am, so I might say Maiko wa gakusei deshita. And this is similar to what's on the page. I'm sticking in the topic just for clarity. But if you're talking about yourself, you might not be saying that. You might just say gakusei deshita. So this is really simple, but I like to start with things that are easy. Let's take this and let's build up some sentences. Let's practice with this. And these might not be sentences that you would normally say in your day-to-day life, but think of a noun. It might be student. It might be a job you used to do. It might be that you used to be a fan of something. You were probably a child at one point, I'm guessing, unless some of you are Benjamin Buttoning your way through life. So let me know what you were. What is something that you were, but you're not now? And for the sake of simplicity, you don't need to put, watashi wa. Just tell us, pick out a noun and tell us what you were. And of course, if you want to say something, but you're not sure what that word is, I want to say I was this, let us know. Just tell us how you say this. We'd be happy to help you. And right now we're focusing on nouns. We're not talking about adjectives as in I was happy or I was hungry. We'll get to that very soon. But right now, make our very natural sentences of I was a child or, I was a teacher, and let me know what you were. And as Gray did so kindly, if you write in kanji, please add the hiragana next to it. There's a lot of us here in the session that are not kanji proficient, and that helps everyone read them. So give it a try if you want, of course. This is, like all of our practice sessions, it's completely voluntary. I'm not going to say, hey, so-and-so, name that begins with F, you haven't typed anything. What's wrong with you? There's none of that. This is just if you want to put it out there, we're happy to read it. And if there's anything that needs correcting, a gentle correction. But otherwise, yeah, give it a try. Let's keep them simple. We're going to make the sentences more and more difficult as the lesson goes by. So yeah, I'll just give you a minute. People put out your answers if you want. Don't worry about making mistakes. Mistakes are not only good for learning, I would go so far as to say they're essential. You can't learn fast enough to suit anyone's needs in this world if you're not making mistakes. So jump out there, make mistakes, screw up. Even if someone chuckles at your mistake, you can't hear them. This is a quiet classroom. And for the one of you that just threw out an adjective, let's hold off on that just for a minute. We are going to get to adjectives very soon. Very, very soon. Okay. Now, I see some answers. Oh, don't forget, very small thing. It's one of those things that if you're really good with the speaking or the pronunciation, it actually can make the writing harder sometimes. But don't forget, if you're extending those vowels out, for example, in high school, the high school part of high school student, almost always, it will look like this. Ko. You use the oo sounds are what you use to extend that vowel out from ko. There are a few words that have a ko. For example, ice. Not the delicious ice, but the ones that come out in blocks from machines. Now, as a few people are finishing up their answers, let me just let you know that just like the des form, if we want to take this and ask a question in the past tense, all we need to do is drop that ka on the end of it. So this is going to be real fast, but I'm going to ask you some questions. Were you this? Were you that? Just give me a quick hi or ie. That's all you need to do. Give me a quick hi or ie. So let's see. I'm trying to think of ones that people might answer differently. 大学生でしたか? 大学生 being the highest of the student classes. University student. I guess you have graduate students, but we'll put them on the side. All right, so I see there's some of you that are younger, some of you that are older, or that you're older, but you didn't go to university. It's all good. All right, let's try this. I hope I'm going to be worried if I get any no's from this, but we'll see. 子供でしたか? Now, let me, I see some questionable answers there, but let me jump to the next one. Now, remember, these are past tense questions. So if this is true for you now, you can't say yes. I'm saying, were you so and so? As in, are you not something now? So let me ask you this. Anime no fan deshita ka? Fan, if you don't know what it is, take a guess. It's probably what you're going to guess. That is a loan word from English. And those of you that are saying hi, that makes me think that you're no longer an anime fan. As in, you liked it before, but now it's not really your thing. And of course, were we having full, natural conversations, no one would just say no here. You would probably say no, I still like it. But, we're keeping things simple for now. Okay. Oh, and just in case you're wondering, some of you might be saying, "Hey, the last two people that typed out no, they did it differently. What's going on there? What's going on with these two?" You've got the ie and ie. For those of you that didn't type that out, any guesses as to the difference between those two? They both mean no. Formality, yes, as in which one's more formal or which one's more casual. Ie is more formal, and formal actually isn't the best word because formal makes it sound like, oh, I wouldn't use this in a normal situation. EA is your standard. That's this is the one that everyone uses. EA is standard, polite. It's not even polite, it's just standard. It's just no. If you're going in the casual direction, you might hear people saying EA. EA. But EA, it's not formal in the sense of, it's stuffy and then no, I couldn't possibly. It doesn't have that feel to it. It's just no. Okay, let's continue. So we just talked about positive sentences, positive past sentences. Let's switch over to the negative ones. And it's on the screen, but we talked about, and let me do this as a recap real fast before we continue what's on the screen. When you talk about negative sentences with this A, wa, B, des pattern, we mentioned several, actually. That there's, within the polite category, there's different levels of politeness. So if I am saying, for example, I'm no longer a student at the moment. I would like to become one again in the future, should time provide, but I'm no longer a student. So I might say something like this. I might also say this, or I could even say this. Now, there's no official guidebook to politeness where everything has ratings to it, where this is a politeness level 10 and this is a 7 or whatever. But generally speaking, these three would all be considered polite. However, the one on the top, janaides, is the, I'm going to say, least polite, but that doesn't make it rude. It is one that you would not write out, like if you're writing something, but you hear it in polite spoken language a lot. But if you're in a situation where it's strictly polite, you're talking to a teacher, you're talking to a boss, and whatnot, you'd probably use the second one or the third one. Ja arimasen is a bit more polite, and dewa arimasen is the most polite. But these all I would put them in the polite category, all three of them. I don't mean this as a recommendation, one way or the other. I tend to use the first one. When I speak to other people, and that's speaking to, say, other parents, that I may or may not know super well, talking at the store to the sales clerk, salesperson at the store, I tend to use the janaides. And as a historical note, I bet some of you are probably using the Genki textbooks. If you're in an actual classroom setting, it's the one that I used way 20 some odd years ago when I was in university. And the Janaides, I don't believe was in the textbooks 20 years ago, but they are now. So it's, languages are living, and the Janaides formation is getting more and more, I'm going to say, accepted on a societal level. Okay, with that in mind, let's take a look at the middle one, and you'll see, what happens here. When we're talking about the past tense, no, as in I wasn't this, or they weren't that. You take that ja arimasen in the middle. You could use the third one as well, and all you do is that deshita that we were practicing with, you throw that onto the end. And you can almost think of it as kind of a mix between the top two. Like you see that des in the first one, and it's getting changed to deshita. But then you're also using the ja arimasen. So let's take this. And for those of you that are wondering, yes, you can kind of mix and match the other versions, but we're going to stick to this one. Keep it simple. And if I want to say I was not something, for example, I'm going to I left it in English, but I wasn't, I'm still not now, but I wasn't really a Dragon Ball fan. Dragon Ball のファンじゃありませんでした。And so it's just saying I wasn't, so and so. I wasn't so and so. And this one is, let's practice this a little bit. We're going to try and practice every step. We might run out of time, but we're going to do our best. Let me show you one more thing, and then we're going to practice talking about things that weren't the case, but they maybe are now. They weren't the case, but they are now. So one more example before we go to that. You can use this as well. The janai desu, you can switch to janakatta desu. And this is also okay. Now, I'm just going to mention this, and then we're going to come back to it after, because you're probably wondering what's going on with that craziness in the middle. Like, what's that nakatta? Well, we haven't had that yet. So I'm just going to throw this out here. You can use this as well, but we're not going to talk about how to make it. It is included in Renshu, but for now, we're going to skip past it. So let's stick to fans of things. And I'd like to know, what is something that you weren't a fan of before? In fact, let's go as far as say something you didn't like before, but you've come to like it. Something that originally you're like, no thank you. But now, now you're like, it's great. And this might shock some of you, but when I was a kid, I was not a Pokemon fan. I love it. I love it now, probably thanks to my son. But I originally was not a Pokemon fan. So Pokemon no fan ja arimasen deshita. It's true now. I do like it. In fact, we have some new Pokemon TCG cards that are going on sale today here in Japan. But I wasn't originally. So for the rest of you, think about music, think about games, think about foods that you weren't crazy about before. Maybe sushi wasn't your thing originally. You thought, oh, raw fish, that's not food. And then you had some one day and your life changed. And now you're crazy about it. So we have one person talking about meat, a specific type of meat, pork. They weren't a fan of pork, but presumably they are now. Another person probably talking about either movies or books, novels, I'm guessing. They weren't a romance fan previously, but they are now. Someone's taking a bit of a deep cut with talking about Foo Fighters. I'm not sure if they're still making music now, although I heard them on my YouTube mix just a few days ago. The person that just typed, they are of the same mind as me. I was not a fan of vegetables when I was younger, and I love them now. They're great. I definitely did not care for them then. I was your typical kid. Pepperoni. That's a really good question. It's one of those katakana words that I don't feel I don't use it enough in Japanese to say, "Oh, it's, it's this." I wish I could say it more, but pepperoni is very uncommon in Japan, sadly. But pepperoni. It's really hard to find true blue pepperoni on pizzas in Japan. And the person with the question, I'm not the word you use, ksaki, is not really a common word. I'm curious as to what house plants. That's a good question. It's we're trying to stick to simple words here, and I'm trying to think of a way to describe it in just a single word. House plants. That's a good question. I would usually just say flower. A slightly more common word that refers to vegetation. What might be something like this? Shokubutsu. But I can't say with full confidence whether or not you could use that to refer to just say houseplants around the house. Don't forget, we are in a beginner lesson, so let's hold off on the kanji. Or if you put kanji in, put the hiragana next to it. That way everyone can take advantage of your sentence. Okay, as you all are typing, I'm going to keep going. So feel free to type. Don't stop typing because I'm talking, but I'm going to jump in. I'm skipping past that. This is just the panel that's in front of you. If you're looking at the screen share, it's just what we just did. If you're referring to, something that's not true, you could use the ja arimasen deshita that we just used. Or if you're going slightly more casual, but still polite, you might have that ja nakatta desu. And for some of you that might be thinking, man, I hate hiragana because I've started to learn kanji and I've realized how much easier it is to read when there's kanji. Where's the kanji for all this? There's not. There's not, unfortunately. The ja arimasen deshita or the ja nakatta desu is just a big chunk of hiragana and you can't get around it. So, sorry about that. Let's continue. We've spent too much time on the first half of the lesson. We're going to jump into adjectives now. We focus on nouns up until this point. And I know some people don't like to think about grammar terms, but nouns are things. Adjectives are those descriptors, hot, cold, spicy, expensive, colors, feelings, all that good stuff. And there's a bit of complexity that comes in with this. And let me show you. We're going to start with the easy ones, the na-adjectives. Real fast. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Type out all the na-adjectives you can think of. Starting with the name of the textbook I just put out earlier, genki. What are other na-adjectives you can think of? You don't have to put the English. I'll put the English as people type them out. Kirei, beautiful or clean. Okina, big. What else do we have? Oshare, which is kind of like stylish, nigiyaka. And as you're typing, I will be right back. Now, a few of you have jumped into the E-adjectives. Atsui, samui, samishi. Those are all E-adjectives. So let's hold off on those for just a sec. But everyone else, you had a bunch of the na-adjectives. Great. The cool thing about na-adjectives, and if you get into the nuts and bolts of na-adjectives, they're technically nouns, which is why you can use them in the same way as the nouns we just did. That makes them nice. So if you're talking about this and you're saying, my room was clean. Maybe your parents complaining, they said, clean your room. And you're like, I did clean it. It was clean a little while ago, but a tornado passed through and now it's not. Then you can use this same formation. Instead of the nouns we were using earlier, you can just drop that na-adjective in, and you're going to have the deshita after it. So, heya wa kirei deshita. Or, depending on certain areas in Japan, Japan is an aging nation, and especially a lot of towns, they're quite literally dying, because of depopulation. And you'll go through areas of a city, a town, that some of the places, all the stores are closed permanently, they're shuttered, and you say, I bet, or I know this used to be, a very vibrant area. But it's not anymore. You'd use that nigiyaka, which I'm going to go ahead and just toss out since I always like to show off our kalchanbat. You might say, oh, it used to be nigiyaka. But why am I talking about in the past? Because it probably isn't now. Now, along the same lines, you can flip that. You can use that same negative form we were talking about before and say, ja nakatta desu, or ja arimasen deshita. So if I say, hey, how was class? And were you able to focus? Was it quiet today? And you say, no, it wasn't. It was really noisy. I couldn't focus. And you might say something like this. Karasu wa shizuka ja arimasen deshita. The class wasn't quiet. So our na-adjectives are awesome because once you get the nouns done, you've got these bundled in as well. And someone mentioned ski earlier in our list of na-adjectives. They do fall into this category. Ski, kirai. And you can use them the same way. So if anyone went the opposite direction on sushi, they used to like it, and then maybe they had a bad sushi, and the sushi started talking back to them, and they realized it was alive, and they said, no, thank you, I'm done. You might say something like, sushi wa suki deshita. I liked it, but now maybe not so much. Or if you are, if you didn't dislike red, but it's not your favorite color now, aka wa kirai janakatta desu. I didn't hate red, but I hate it now, kind of thing. So before we continue, I'm going to take these two verbs our special adjectives, and let's practice with these a little bit. So I'd like you to talk, I'm going to give you a choice. Think about something. We were talking about being fans before. Let's talk about just things that you like. You didn't like before and you like now, or flip it around. You liked it before, but you don't like it now. So you're either going to say, nani nani ga suki deshita. I liked, past tense, I liked so and so. Or you might say, I didn't like it, but now I do. It's grown on me. So let me know what, again, you've probably seen by now, but this is really a relaxed place to practice your sentences. I might point out small mistakes, but I'm not even using people's names. And so you don't have a whole bunch of eyeballs on you if you make a mistake. Just give it a try. So the last sentence that just came up, they liked shrimp. Maybe they're not crazy about it now. Someone didn't care for rain so much, but maybe they appreciate it now. We have someone talking about not caring for anime originally before, but they probably watch it some now or watch it a lot. What about the rest of you? There's 28 of us today. It's a nice group. So I'd love to see more people's sentences. And don't worry, you're in good company. If the heart system in our server is of any indication, we've got a bunch of beginners here. People that have been studying Japanese anywhere from 0 days, up to a few months, maybe even a year. People, work at different paces. We even have the person that just posted, they're brand new to the server. So thank you for joining us. The person talking about dogs, you probably wanted the ki in there, suki, and not suma. That M is right next to the K on the keyboard, so I totally get that. That's not nice. Don't blame the cat. Although maybe the cat saw you talking about the dog and, decided to jump in there. Okay, as people are finishing up with their sentences, again, if you're typing, please keep typing. Never stop typing because I start talking. It might feel like a drop of water in the bucket, but taking each sentence, each time you type those things out, it makes it easier to use it in the future. And I'll take this time to rant about something, a good rant. But a lot of people, I feel, don't think enough about what it really means to understand vocabulary or grammar. But let's stick with vocabulary. Most of you probably know what good morning is in Japanese. In fact, if you have been taking a Japanese class, maybe at your high school or university or civic center nearby, you probably say it a lot. It might be good morning, it might be hello, you might say thank you often. And what's important to remember is that just because you remember something, for example, that ohayo gozaimasu is good morning, there's still levels of knowing that. And the question is, when you need to produce that, or when you hear it and you need to understand what it was, how long does it take you? When I say ohayo gozaimasu, did you understand what I was saying before I even finished it? Did it take you 100 milliseconds? Did it take you a second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds? Most of you probably know that at some point. You'll get it. But every time you use it, that speed speeds up. And so it goes from half a second to 450 milliseconds, to a third of a second, to a tenth of a second. So even those of you, I see some people that have green hearts, that have orange hearts, which means they've been studying a bit longer. they can still benefit from typing these simple sentences out. It makes it so those connections are just faster and faster and faster. So it's not a, I know this word, I can go on. It's a, I know it, but how quickly can I pull it out of my head? Or how quickly can I understand it if I hear it? So, in so many words, you should take every opportunity to practice. Every time, even if it seems too simple, is going to speed you up. Okay, rant over. Let's keep going. We are going to switch over to the hardest, but still not crazy hard chunk of our lesson, which are the E-adjectives. Now, before that, just like before, let's get as many E-adjectives out as we can. And if you feel like it, you can put the English next to your word. If not, I will say it. But if you want to say something like this, all the better. That way, it's not just review. It might be teaching someone else a new word. So let's see what we've got. The answers that come out usually tell us how much people are thinking about food. And the answer is usually a lot. So we've got, there's a bunch. Oh, and they're about to go off the screen. Amai, which is sweet. Muzugashi, hard or difficult. Wakai, young. It's usually not zurai unless it's attached to the end of a verb. So it's usually a tsu without the ten on the end of it. Tsurai is kind of, it's a bit hard to explain. It's kind of like rough. It's more, tsurai is hard, but emotionally hard. Watching your best friend get rejected by someone that they love, that would hit you in the heart. That's tsurai. We've got people talking about cute, scary, busy, kitsui, which is kind of like sarai. It's just kind of an unfavorable, tricky situation. Natsukashi is a really, I always like that word, natsukashi, which does mean nostalgic, as the person typed out. However, the strange thing about natsukashi is if you think of the word English, if you think of nostalgic in English, who would you picture using that word? You'd think of adults talking about their childhood, or, even older people talking about when they were younger, stuff like that. But I hear kids use natsukashi in Japanese, and I feel like the time span is much shorter in Japanese, to where you can say natsukashi and be referring to a year ago when you were in preschool, but now you're in elementary school. It's like, oh, the good old days of preschool last year. Whereas we would refer to natsukashi as in, 20 years ago when I was still a high school student, so and so. So it's just an interesting thing in that nostalgic is correct, but it doesn't give you the right feel for just how often it's used. Okay, you guys gave me a ton of E-adjectives. Thank you. Let's look at how we conjugate them. Now this one is a bit different, but you're going to see as we study more and more that this particular spelling change is actually quite common in Japanese. Just like the other conjugations, when I say that, you might be wondering what I'm talking about. Kawaii, cute. What's not cute? Does anyone remember? How would you say not cute? Kawaikunai. And the thing I wanted everyone to see is you drop that last E. Like whenever you're making changes to E-adjectives, that last E always just boop, just disappears. And it's the same thing here. So you're dropping that E, and then you're adding katta. Katta doesn't mean anything. Like it's not you're adding this word to the end of it. It doesn't really mean anything in particular. It's just that's the way that the past tense is formed. So this one is the way this is used. So let's stick with kawaii. I'm gonna say, and we're sticking with the polite form, so that des is going onto the end of it. And the screen says isogashi, but I'm gonna focus on something positive. Kawaikatta desu. So and so. I might be talking about a cat I saw, a child, an anime, a shirt, or whatever. You know, it, he, she was cute. And with this one, it's a bit different from the nouns we were using before. I could be referring to my daughter who is 4. So of course, 4-year-olds are cute. And I could say kawaikatta desu, and I could mean she was cute because she was doing some silly dance yesterday. And that doesn't imply that she's no longer cute. I'm just referring to my feelings in that situation. You know, at that time, I thought she was cute. I also think she's cute today and probably tomorrow. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's no longer the case now. And the one that you probably hear a lot, or you can use a lot, is if you're talking about food that you ate. If you visit Japan and then you come back and for whatever reason you're talking about your trip to Japan in Japanese to someone, you're going to say, "Oh, I had that food. It was so delicious. Oishikatta desu. It was yummy. It was good. It was delicious." And so that's how we're going to use it here. So isogashi would be isogashikatta desu, as you see on the screen. So I do want to practice as much as I can today. And so let's try. Real fast, this is a new word that I don't think we've covered before, but sore is one of our pronouns in Japanese. It refers to that, as in not necessarily something that's right close to you. This, that. And if you, maybe, hopefully, if we finish this lesson, you might say this about the lesson today. You say, that was easy. それは優しかったです. I hope you feel that way. But let's step away from the lesson and let's talk about ourselves and think about yesterday. Tell me something about yesterday. You can say yesterday was hot, yesterday was cold, yesterday I was busy, yesterday I was happy, I was sad, whatever. You can talk about the food yesterday. I had some curry yesterday, and it was a bit spicy as far as Japanese standards go. カレーは辛かったです. And feel free to, you might want to put a topic because we're branching out a little bit. If you talk about your own feelings, you might say, I was sleepy. But if you say the weather was, the weather was cold yesterday, you might say something like tenki wa, tenki being the weather, tenki wa samukatta desu, or food, or yourself. So tell me about something yesterday. One poor person is talking about how yesterday was boring, and I know those days. They happen. So someone else is busy. Oh, and the people that word kino, that everyone's using, that's yesterday. So just in case you didn't have that already, there's a new word for you. Kino wa. As for yesterday, it was this, it was that. And don't forget that when you say kino wa, you're not necessarily referring to, the adjective doesn't necessarily refer to yesterday. So if you say, one person said, 昨日はつまらなかったです. Yesterday, but they're still talking about themselves. They're just specifying the date. I was bored. Or they might translate it as yesterday was boring. And one small thing, this is something that trips up a lot of beginning learners. But when you're dealing with the pronunciation or the hiragana writing, when you talk about hot, something that's hot to the touch, as in this pot is hot, compared to the weather is hot, the pronunciation doesn't change. And the person that's not sure about your sentence, that's perfect. That's fine. However, with cold, the words actually change. So there's two ways of saying cold. And basically, samui refers to the weather. And that doesn't just mean the weather outside, that means, the temperature. The temperature of the air around you. So this room is samui, or the tenki is samui. However, tsumetai refers to something that's cold that you can touch. So maybe because it's cold outside, the car is cold. So one is to put it another way, or ice, exactly. Samui is the coldness that you feel, like that you can feel without having to do anything about it. Tsumetai is something that's cold because you put your finger or leg or whatever next to it. You touch it and you say, oh, that's cold. Samui is the air coldness. Tsumetai is everything else. Okay, we have 5 minutes left and we still have a bit more to go, so let's keep going. For you being cold, do you mean as in my body is cold? And yeah, cold hand on someone. Yeah, if your body is cold, actually, that's a good question. It would be neither. You'd probably say there's a verb. This isn't the best translation, but I'm going to say to be cold. Hieru. And let me have Kal-chan help us out as well. And so, for example, this is something that people will say, "Oh man, I'm really cold." And it's not referring to a touch; it's more like you're referring to the condition of something. Kogoeru, I believe, is more of a. I don't hear it that often, but when we're talking about our bodies or the room, and you're referring to the room kind of by itself, or you're referring to your own body, you might say something like hieru or hietemasu if you go with the present progressive, the ing form. But good question. Let me pull us back onto the last couple of things we need to do. Our e verb, good. It in the same way, if you remember, if you say good to bad, you are not good rather. We went to yokunai, as in good is e, not good is yokunai. We're going to use that same kind of change. If we want to say something was good, we say yokatta. And for everyone that said that they were fans of anime or manga, you have heard this. Because you hear people saying, yokatta after something happens, after something good happens. It's like, oh, that was good. Someone comes back safely, or they finish the quest, or whatever happens to be. Yokatta. That's this one. That's the past tense form of good. Now, last one. We're kind of wedging this in. Sorry, don't have enough time to do it. But with the negative forms, remember, we had, if we use the one that's on the screen, we went from samui to samukunai. This was back with the present tense. We're still dropping that. We're dropping the e off the edge. Woo, bye e. And we're adding katta onto the end of it. So if I say yesterday was cold, I would say, whoops, if I can, or yesterday was not cold, excuse me. it gets a bit longer. Your tongue starts to twist in on itself. But 昨日は寒くなかったです. It wasn't cold yesterday. And so, if you want to get a crazy long version of it, I'm not sure if you've had takoyaki before. Those are the octopus balls that they take little pieces of octopus and they fry them up in a ball of dough. And let's say you got some takoyaki and they weren't warm. They were, they were almost cold. Maybe they'd been sitting out for too long. Then you would say takoyaki wa atakaku nakatta desu. Atataku nakatta desu. Which is taking it, we have atatakai, warm, atatakakunai, not warm, and then we're taking it and putting it in the past tense form. Atatakaku nakatta desu. Try saying that to yourself and see if your tongue just gives up and leaps out of your mouth and runs away. Now, we have just 1 minute, but there's one more thing I wanted to mention, and I believe we hit on it in more detail later on in Renshu. But one small thing, we've kept these sentences fairly simple. We've kept them fairly simple, and take a look at this real fast. What does this word mean? Kakkui. Kakkui. Cool. What kind of cool? What kind of cool are we talking about? Cool looking, cool person. Yeah. Cool guy or girl. Yeah, it's a broad term. And you're all correct. Generally speaking. Let's say you saw someone that was cool yesterday. Or you saw someone and we're talking about that someone. And let's call them A. Let's call them A-san. A-san's this person, and you want to say they were a cool person. Now, this is kind of strange saying they were a cool person because usually you would just say they're cool. But actually, I have an even better example. Excuse me. It's not actually, you're not wrong, but you're not going in the direction that I'm going to go in. Let me give you a better example. You all presumably have or had fathers or mothers. And let's say, it's the usual trope that dad isn't cool anymore, but mom says, yeah, he was really cool back in the day. And you say, what, my dad? Really? No, that's not possible. My dad doesn't have an ounce of cool in his body. You've either felt that yourself or you've seen it in a show or whatnot. And your mother is saying, no, he was a really cool student back in the day. A really cool person back in the day. And, to say a cool person, excuse me, I put one too many characters in there. There we go. Kakkui. Well, yeah. If you are saying that, how would we say he was? Now, this is, if you answer, please put your answer in spoilers, which is using, which is doing this. You put the answer in between the two bars, except don't put any spaces in between the bars, and it looks like this. Here's my question. If you say dad, so let's say otosan, I'll give you the first half of the sentence. Otosan wa, how would you say he was a cool person? Finish that sentence for me. You don't need the otosan wa, just what comes after that. To say he was a cool person, or attractive, or stylish, or whatever. How do we take kakkui hito and change that into past tense? The reason I'm asking is there's a very wrong answer, but a lot of you will choose it. So I want you to make the mistake and then we'll correct it. And that way, Gray take that space out between there we go. Yeah, I put spaces in mine just because if I didn't, I couldn't show you what it looked like. Anyway, I'll give you a few more seconds and then we'll wrap things up because I know our next group of learners are waiting to jump into our pre-intermediate example. So, we just talked about taking those, taking the adjectives, and we talked about the past tense form. And some of you went so far as to say, かっこよかった. So, if this isn't the answer to the question, but if you just want to say dad was cool, you'd say something like お父さんはかっこよかったです. And it's よかった because it's got that E on the end of it. It's got the E on the end of it. However, if, we've learned how to do things like this. Put adjectives in front of nouns. So if you say delicious sushi or yummy sushi, you'd say oishii sushi. However, when you do things in past tense, these adjectives, they change a little bit. So let me show you the answer. Now I'm going to put it in 2 lines just to make it a bit easier to read. 3 lines, actually. お父さんはかっこいい人でした. When we're talking in the past, it's whatever comes at the end of the sentence or the end of the clause, that's what gets conjugated. The かっこいい doesn't get changed. Oh, I put the u in there again. I apologize for that. I don't know why that it's just slipping out. Actually, u also works. There's かっこいい and there's かっこいい. かっこいい, the shorter version, is a bit more common. But anyway, when you have these adjectives that are in front of nouns, you leave them as is. And so a bit more literally, this sentence can be dad was a person, that is cool. So back then, 10 years ago or whenever it was, he is cool. So he is a cool person. That statement was true. Back then, at that time, it was present tense. Might be a way that helps you out. But the easier way, I think, is just when you're conjugating things, you only conjugate what's at the end. You only conjugate what's at the end of the sentence. And in this case, it's the des that's coming at the end. It's coming after hito. So you've got that hito deshita. And I apologize that we don't have more time to really dig into that, but I just wanted to mention it. Anyway, thank you so much for coming. This events video will be available on Renshu in our YouTube channel, as well as here the Discord. So if you need to slow down, look at it once more, feel free to do so. And I hope you join us next week when we talk about the second part of our past tense forms. So thank you so much.